Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today, we bring you some news Camilla in turmoil after new evidence found in her private estate revealed a shocking secret. A recent story on how Queen Camilla's private estate in Wiltshire Mill House uses cutting-edge scanning technology has started a long and often heated debate among historians, royal critics, and the general public. The original reports say that what started out as a normal architectural survey to make a full digital record of a historic property ended up with results that were surprising and interesting. These stories say that a technical investigation of the structure and its secret compartments found architectural problems, storage areas that had never been documented previously, and collections of papers and personal items. These finds have led to a further examination of the estate's function, both as a private refuge and as a possible storehouse of unwritten or inadequately scrutinized history. As a result, the story has made it easier for private biographies to be included in the continuous public story of the modern monarchy. This has led to worries about provenance, custodianship, and the importance of archive responsibility in relation to the private homes of famous people. Mill House has been a symbol of a specific sort of private retreat for many years. It is a tangible representation of a person's life that, although intersecting with public duties, has its own unique geography and memory. The Grade 2 listed property is in the peaceful Wiltshire countryside, surrounded by mature trees and protected by gates and hedgerows. It has been called a retreat, where Camilla could build a home life that is separate from the ceremonial and institutional duties that come with public residences. She bought the house in the middle of the 1990s, when her life was going through a lot of changes. The house has always been shown in the media and in biographies as a place where family, friends, and grandchildren could stay, where private routines could be kept, and where more generally a private space could feel safe, even when it was being watched all the time. The idea of seclusion has always been interesting to people. For many years, people thought of Mill as the site of one of the most controversial royal romances in recent history. It was a location where Camilla could go away from the press and keep her connection with the Prince of Wales, who was the Prince of Wales at the time, private. The main story focused on a life outside of the conventional domestic arrangements of official royal households, with an emphasis on quiet seclusion, normality at home, and everyday lives. On the other hand, sharing information on a full technical analysis of the property made this idea less certain. The study used a range of non-invasive investigative technologies, such as LiDAR light detection and ranging photogrammetry, thermal imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and other instruments for mapping structures. These methods were claimed to be used. The main goal of the research was to document the building's historical layers so that they could be used for planning conservation and documenting history. Some clarification is needed to help readers who don't know about such procedures understand why such a survey can suddenly appear important. LiDAR may help specialists make an extremely precise three-dimensional picture of the inside and outside of a building. To do this, a lot of quick-pulsed laser beams are sent out, and the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back off a surface is measured. Photogrammetry is a method that makes three-dimensional models by stacking photographic images on top of each other. This is done to make textured visual reconstructions that can be measured and annotated. Thermal cameras may find changes in surface temperature that might mean there are cavities, void fill, or problems with the structure. Ground-penetrating radar (GPR), on the other hand, may find buildings that are underground, such as buried foundations, ancient landscaping, or underground chambers. These methods may give you a very thorough picture of a building's physical history when used together. You don't have to do any damaging research or invasive excavations. Heritage experts and conservators like these kinds of inspections because they might find new additions, doorways that were formerly blocked, or parts of the fabric that have been modified because of repeated repairs and restorations. One survey might provide you a lot of evidence that points to the same problem. This is achievable because several methods work together to help explain why this is feasible. LiDAR and photogrammetry may be used to make three-dimensional maps of structural problems. Thermal imaging can show temperature differences that are linked to hidden cavities, and ground-penetrating radar GPR can confirm what is below the surface. The thermal images can be affected by the environment around them and may only last for a short time. The ground-penetrating radar GPR can only penetrate certain types of soil and building materials. The LiDAR can only record surface features and not contents on its own. Experienced practitioners in practice carefully analyze the combined data and then compare the results to earlier plans and on-site inspections to make sure they are accurate. This methodological complexity validates the use of technology in heritage work. Nevertheless, it also cautions against oversimplified narratives of discovery that inflate the capacity of data to substantiate claims. Nonetheless, regarding Ray Mill, the technical data disseminated in the media, often presented with varying degrees of accuracy and sometimes influenced by conjecture, purported to reveal more than only the structure's evolution. It was alleged that architectural problems were found throughout the inquiry. These problems included cavities and sealed-off spaces that didn't match the official plans, obstructed pathways, and areas that seemed like they had been ignored or abandoned. More importantly, the scan is said to have found the whereabouts of things that were stored in places that had not been documented before. These places included empty spaces beneath the floor-locked attics and storage rooms that weren't being used. In the following descriptions, there were mentions of personal items, family heirlooms, letters, and documents. A lot of people and scholars are now paying a lot of attention to these things because if they are properly recognized and validated, they could be used to create new historical interpretations, or at the very least to add new documentary texture to events that are already in dispute. When talking about the supposed findings that have come from the technical inspection of Ray Mill, the first group of things to think about are personal treasures and family items that are linked to Camilla's life before and after she became a queen. The second group includes things and documents that seem to have anything to do with the Windsor dynasty or events that have had a big effect on the public. The first group, which includes fading letters, family photos, portraits, children's toys, and pieces of costume jewelry that are said to have been passed down through the Shan family and other families connected to the Shan family, is what one would expect to find in a family home that has been lived in for a long time. These sorts of artifacts are physical reminders of intimate memories and the continuity of home. In many families, they still remain in their original places, because they are cherished, not because they are kept in a systematic way. There is a chance that an estate like Ray Mill may be an active place for Camilla to keep her unique identity. It would be a place where family history and everyday living are real. It shouldn't be surprising that there are family heirlooms stored in a private home. People who are sympathetic to Camilla say that the fact that these heirlooms are kept at Ray Mill instead of being put in an institutional archive shows how important the estate is to Camilla as a place where she can remember private memories. A lot of people famous or not keep family letters and images close to their hearts since they are emotional objects. The presence of such things may humanize a public figure and signify the persistence of non-institutional relationships, including those to parents, siblings, childhood environments, and daily routines. One way to look at their continuous presence in a private house is as a way to keep a personal history alive that is kept apart from official record-keeping. They hold both sadness and gladness. The second group, which is known for finding things that appear to have anything to do with the royal family, has been the subject of the most ongoing dispute. It has been reported in the news that artifacts with royal insignia, documents with official-looking seals, and things that don't appear to belong to Camilla's immediate family have been uncovered. When things that may be seen as having institutional significance are discovered in a private home, it raises questions that are both hard and easy to address. The issue is, how did these things get here? Were they gifts? What are the transitional postings throughout the era of household consolidation, or were papers that were important to the institution placed outside of the formal care of the royal household's archive systems, either by design or by accident? Many possible reasons have been made public. When two individuals create shared areas, personal items, gifts, and messages will naturally mix together. This is a harmless fiction that hints at what life is really like at home. Ray Mill may have maintained recollections of their marriage during the years they were together. These included gifts that friends and acquaintances who were close to the royal family gave them, as well as things that partners exchanged with one another. In this framework, the presence of such commodities does not imply any evil intent. Instead, it signifies the blending of households and the casual movement of personal possessions throughout the community. It would have been better for valuables to be kept in a private home instead of in public royal stores, especially when a relationship needed to be kept secret for reasons of reputation or safety. This would have been the case. Some skeptics and observers have suggested a more critical view, which says that moving papers with an apparent royal provenance into a private setting may be an attempt to hide historically important materials from official examination. When official archives are housed in a royal government or institutional environment, they frequently include rules for how to store and share artifacts that are thought to have lasting historical value. Archivists usually have to keep track of, protect, and occasionally provide people limited access to these kinds of things. Taking away these papers or keeping them outside of government hands might make things less clear and make it harder to do historical study. The most shocking thing about the allegations is the idea that important documents about important and contentious events in recent royal history were kept from institutional archivists. If this assertion is accurate, the management of such resources might significantly impact academic research and public understanding. But to really understand what that potential means, you need to be careful and delicate. Not every document with a seal or every object with a crest is publicly available, or an administrative record. Gifts and personal messages usually include motifs that are both iconic and commemorative, like official emblems, even though they are mostly private. If the documents in question are found to be personal communication, like private letters that express love, sympathy, or other emotions, they are put in a different group of archival treatment than administrative records or state papers. It is crucial to know the difference between personal communication between individuals and institutional paperwork that explains decisions, rules, or the use of public authority. Even if the people involved are famous figures, personal communication between them is not usually the same thing. Even while there are questions about the goal, the scan showed that the architectural problems also have a practical side. Houses change with time, especially those that have been there for a long period. Doorways that are blocked, cupboards that have been patched up, hallways that were originally used by servants, and awkward spaces are typically the consequence of consecutive construction projects and efforts to adapt older buildings to growing standards of comfort and technology. Ducts, chimneys, and service lines need to be moved. Plaster has to be fixed. Flooring needs to be elevated and put back down, and plaster needs to be patched. A house constructed in the 1700s will probably have some unusual structural features. This means that just because there are spots that are walled off doesn't mean that there is concealing going on. Still, these kinds of discoveries, especially when they are linked to tales of things that have been kept safe, readily, feed stories of hiding, and the public's imagination is unlikely to accept simple architectural explanations when the artifacts themselves appear to have symbolic meaning. The technical warnings are quite significant here. Non-invasive surveys may sometimes find problems, but they can't always tell when they happened or how they work. The former tenants of a hole that has been closed up might have been an icehouse expansion, a coal storage, or a service corridor that was moved. In thermal imaging, insulation that has built up or been added later may show up as different signals. On the other hand, piles of old curtains, trunks, or garden tools that are kept at home might make the same radar signal as archive boxes. It is easy to understand why individuals may want to read things into scans, but conservators and survey experts advise against making the error of linking strange things in remote sensing with documented treasures without doing further research. For appropriate practice, a step-by-step strategy is needed. First, technology should be utilized to focus attention. Then, locations should be opened and reviewed in controlled conditions with the occupant's permission. Historians and conservators have a habit of stressing both the possible value of any newly discovered materials and the need for methodological care before making any conclusions when they join in on the public debate. It is commonly known that little private papers may change how we think about things. For instance, marginalia in letters, an unknown billet, or a home ledger may provide insights into social networks, financial arrangements, and personal relationships that remain unrecorded in official documents. In the field of modern history, there are several cases when private contact has changed the focus of academic research and changed the way biographies are written. At the same time, archivists stress the importance of provenance chain, of custody authenticity, and conservation. If documents are accessible, they may be incomplete, significantly damaged, or ambiguous in their interpretation. Any confident interpretation must be followed by careful verification. This is one of the reasons why it's so important that there isn't a complete list of all the purported things found at Raymill that have been independently verified. There isn't enough information to make definitive historical assertions, but there have been enough descriptions that have found their way into public conversation to make people guess. There have been a lot of news pieces, some of which clearly warn about how limited the information is that is now accessible, and others that are more likely to make the headlines seem more exciting. The many different ways people have interpreted the absence of clear and verified facts have been heavily influenced by existing negative views about Camilla and the monarchy. These opinions have been shaped as much by the incomplete facts as by the feelings that are already there. It is hard to appreciate the legal and institutional considerations that come into play in these kinds of circumstances. The royal household keeps archives. Modern administrative records are stored according to set rules. Throughout history, certain state or institutional papers have been given to public repositories at regular intervals or according to the wishes of the owners. The Royal Archives at Windsor, for example, are the official place where many government archives and collections are kept. Some things, on the other hand, may be maintained in private care. Private estates, unlike public institutions, remain under the jurisdiction of their owners and their advisors, with privacy regulations safeguarding some kinds of material. Because of this, the public's legitimate interest in historical materials must be weighed against the owner's right to privacy and the legal rights of owners. Also, the meaning of the term official royal document might be called into doubt. This is particularly true in a royal household where the lines between giving personal care to individuals and doing institutional duties have always been fuzzy. There are many other legal and procedural factors that might affect how these scenarios could be handled. The Freedom of Information Act of 2000 requires certain public bodies to provide certain types of information when asked. However, this law does not apply to the sovereign while they are doing royal duties, nor does it apply to the private files of royal family members. The Public Records Act is another law that governs how public institutions and government agencies store and move records that they create. But the law doesn't cover private homes and personal conversations very effectively. The Data Protection Act 2018, which puts the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation into UK law, is the main legislation that protects personal data. It includes sensitive material that may be found in letters and private diaries. It decides how to handle any substance that comes into touch with live people as a consequence. Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights protects the right to respect for private and family life. Courts have also said that privacy considerations are still very important when making judgments about archives that impact living people. In this case, human rights are also important. Based on all of these frameworks, it seems that the basic assertion of public interest does not always come before people's rights to privacy and property. Moreover, ethical inquiries are emphasized. Even if documents of important historical worth are discovered in a private home, the people in charge of them must follow conservation rules and respect the privacy of living people. Archivists usually suggest thorough inspection, interim protective measures, and, if appropriate, the creation of digital copies when it comes to keeping fragile things safe. This is done before any decisions are made about giving people more access. Historians say that early calls for quick public release may be at odds with legitimate worries about the safety of materials and the rights of those whose private correspondence is impacted. So there has to be a quiet but important conversation about stewardship, access, and professional care going on behind the scenes of the public spectacle that this discovery has caused. There are numerous stages involved in practical stewardship. Old household storage may be dangerous because of things like acidic paper water damage, bugs, and mold. The first step in triage is to evaluate whether the products need to be preserved right now. When preservation is needed, conservators stabilize materials. Deacidification, controlled drying, and putting the items in archival quality frames are all common ways to do this. Then follows the cataloging procedure, which entails carefully gathering contextual information, such as the date, physical description, provenance indicators, and inscriptions. This lets researchers look at the originals and figure out how important they are without hurting them. It could be conceivable to set up deposit agreements for papers that appear to be important to public affairs, or events in history that are more important. The goal of these agreements is to make sure that the documents stay safe for a long time and to create restrictions for who may see them, when they can be seen, or when they can be released. Digitization may make it simpler to get at fragile originals, but it also raises questions about who owns digital copies and how they might be made available to the public. Many opponents interpret the Ray Mill results as a way to reinforce worries that Princess Anne has had for a long time. She is known for being very dedicated to her job and for being very honest and straightforward in public. The Princess Royal has always been one of the senior royals who has been more mindful about her reputation and the risks to institutions. Some royal biographers and other people in the business have said that she was doubtful about the propriety of activities that were likely to hurt the public's trust in the monarchy. People don't only see her fears about a controversial private partner moving up the ranks of royal life as personal enmity. They frequently see them as a sign that she is worried about the institution's future and the public's trust in it. When seen via that interpretive lens, the potential, albeit speculative, that things of royal value may reside inside a private residence incites worries that seem to have been foreseen by her perspective. The scenario that is unfolding from Ray Mill, in which personal and institutional objects might be linked, appears to confirm long-standing worries about blurring boundaries. A traditionalist who appreciates a clear line between the Crown's ceremonial duties and private life is especially worried about the chance of this happening. Critics of Camilla have used this apparent proof to their advantage, while supporters have countered by saying that royal life in the 20th and 21st centuries has never been so clearly separated, and that many homes have traditionally mixed private and official items without any bad intentions. The enduring triangle of Charles, Diana, and Camilla is the focal point of the whole discourse. This triangle is just a bunch of relationships and public dramas that were the main way that a lot of people in the UK learned about the royal family in the late 1900s. People will never forget the crazy things that happened in the 1980s and 1990s. The end of Charles and Diana's marriage, the harshness of tabloid culture, and a constitutional crisis that was caused in large part by the public's knowledge of very private matters are all examples of these occurrences. The widely seen Panorama interview with Princess Diana had a huge impact on how people felt and what they thought about her. Many others saw her as the perfect example of how one person may sacrifice for the greater good when institutions are too inflexible. During the conversation, she said she felt alone and betrayed. For a long time, a lot of people still thought of Camilla as the person who had broken up that relationship. The emotional impact of those memories is heightened by the supposed discovery of treasures at Raymill that date back to the period when Charles and Diana's marriage was facing significant challenges. The idea that personal items tied to certain weeks and months are kept in private quarters is not only an archaeological fascination for many, it also prompts moral and symbolic evaluations of the persons involved. Things from that time, such as photographs, letters, or little mementos, might help people remember and bring back feelings of sadness and guilt. Some critics think that keeping these kinds of things in a private sanctuary is a failure to fully acknowledge the past or to show how important the past is in a way that most people would find satisfying. People's reactions to these prospects have always been shaped by more recent successes as well. Prince Harry's book, Spare, which came out in 2023, gave people a chance to speak out and criticize the royal family's connections and Camilla's role in the story of the royal family in a very personal way. Harry's tale included a detailed account of the family fights and the steps he thought were meant to solidify his power and public image. The memoir's strong language and emotionally charged events changed the way people spoke about things in public and in certain areas. People's overall perceptions moved away from abstract historical arguments and toward issues of character and motive. When readers who already didn't believe how the house worked saw parts that showed private pleas to keep people from becoming involved more publicly or that advised using media connections strategically to push a rehabilitation story, their doubts grew. To be clear, Spare is just one person's view on a very controversial family problem. It is not proof that has been backed up by recorded evidence. Still, the release of this book changed the cultural context of the debate that is presently going on around Raymill. Because of this, every supposed find of royal-related things grew more politically and emotionally charged. People who support Camilla and the monarchy in general have responded to these kinds of portrayals by saying that being involved with the media, whether it's proactive or reactive, is an inescapable part of living at the top of public life. Maintaining one's reputation and relationships with the press has always been an important element of public life for those in high office, even if it may be ethically wrong in certain situations. If this was indeed her goal, Camilla's efforts to improve her public image could not be perceived as a cynical or planned assault on others, but rather as normal political behavior. People who are trying to do their duties under a modern constitutional monarchy often take part in actions that are meant to maintain or restore public goodwill. This is because the senior royals' ability to do their jobs is closely tied to how much people like them. In today's world, where social media and 24-hour news cycles may unfairly punish perceived mistakes, it is hard to tell the difference between necessary defensive actions and aggressive manipulation. This is particularly true now, when technology is changing so quickly. The coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla on May 6, 2023, is still a significant event in the story of this play. A lot of individuals who were there thought it was the symbolic end of a long process of reintegration. It was a public act of legitimization that turned private rehabilitation into formal institutional approval. Others, particularly those who are still unsure about their own beliefs or political views, thought that the event brought up old arguments and showed that public rituals can only do so much to erase memories or satisfy competing moral judgments. So the coronation didn't stop the fighting. In fact, it could have made it worse. This is because formal recognition tends to make grievances more clear and put things to a close. But instead of being the end of the story, these occurrences show that the story of integration and acceptance will keep being tested and transformed. This is because the arrival of Raymill in the public's mind at around the same time in history has made any story of definitiveness hard to follow. The Raymill event raises a variety of issues that are both practical and institutional in character, including how to best balance private property rights with the public's interest in preserving historical places. Verification is a clear issue that has to be addressed. The first and most important stage is to do an inventory and appraisal that is fair and done by professionals and, if possible, overseen by skilled archivists and conservators who can confirm the source and relevance of any find. This type of work would have to be done with the highest respect for someone's right to privacy and the law's constraints, as well as with the necessary ways to protect fragile documents. Depending on the type of materials that are found, there may be a number of options for what to do with them next. They could stay in private custody, be given to the Royal Archives or other public repositories, with certain access rules be embargoed for a certain amount of time, or in very rare cases their rediscovery could lead to legal or political discussions about public ownership if it can be shown that they are institutional papers and not private correspondence. Any decision of this kind is laden with political intricacies. For instance, presidential libraries in the United States make it official that records made by those in office must be kept safe. The state has already endeavored to safeguard and provide access to documents deemed of public importance. It is harder to draw direct analogies since the British political system is based on a number of different conventions and traditions, and many royal papers are kept secret, and prerogative powers are used. Nonetheless, the Ray Mill incident can prompt a renewed discourse over the management of things linked to the monarchy, as well as the balance between private stewardship and collective memory. There would need to be a debate before any move could be taken toward public deposit. Owners can set access limits to protect privacy, such as embargoes for a certain number of years, redaction agreements to hide the identities of third parties, or tiered access, which lets researchers study documents under strict conditions while keeping them closed to general publishing. Curatorial policy would need to be made in order to find a balance between scholarly interest, the privacy of live people, and the possible diplomatic sensitivity that royal correspondence may frequently have. There are times when joint custody arrangements are conceivable. These agreements say that private owners still own the resources, but they lend them to a repository under legally enforceable terms that make sure they are kept safe for a long time, and that only certain people may use them. There are also reputational effects when it comes to controlling costs. From the monarchy's point of view, this story is another reminder that old problems may still be there and that symbols are important. Queen Camilla thinks that the way people think about supposed secret collections of royal-adjacent things doesn't fit with stories that were told in the 1990s and then retold in the years that followed. The occurrence brings up bigger discussions about how institutions that are based on history and mystery ought to be transparent and accountable in the view of the public. The talk itself has already changed how people think about the estate. In the public's mind, it is no longer simply a quiet rural home. It is now a place that may have a lot of historical significance. This is true no matter what the truth is about any checks that could happen at Ray Mill. Political actors might also react. Members of the opposition political party or parliamentary select committees that deal with constitutional issues, media standards, or public administration can ask questions or ask for clarification about whether or not any state-related materials have been kept outside of official archives. Even though these kinds of actions would have to carefully follow the constitutional traditions that protect some parts of royal privacy, and the rights of the sovereign, political pressure can still change how institutions respond, especially when public opinion is involved. In the same way, groups that represent journalists and agencies that set the standards for the press will be keeping an eye on how privacy and provenance concerns are handled. They could also not like news that is too sensational and goes beyond what is known to be true. All of this should not hide an important methodological warning. Any claims about the ultimate nature of the materials should be seen as temporary until experts have classified and verified the objects. Public narratives are created quickly, whereas archival verification is a long and difficult process. The most responsible way to do things is to demand thorough expert examination, to follow crucial legal protections for private communication, and to accept that how we understand history depends on how we handle primary material. This is true for both historians and the general public at the same time. This episode may impart some broader lessons that transcend the particulars of Ray Mill and the individuals involved. First, it shows how new technologies may challenge traditional ideas about home environments and bring to light material histories that were previously overlooked or disregarded. As scanning and imaging technology becomes more common and easier to utilize in historical contexts, it is likely that there will be more cases when private areas are found to include unexpected layers of the past. Second, it shows how private custodianship and public memory are still at odds in modern democracies. Items and records preserved in personal collections may significantly contribute to the communal comprehension of history. Yet their management is regulated by property rights and privacy standards that democratic societies must uphold. Third, it reminds us that how we understand history may be affected by how we feel about it. Things that are linked to unpleasant or very emotional situations become more important than their financial value. They may even bring up moral arguments long after the events have happened. The Ray Mill case has made it clear that there are a lot of difficulties with how private memory and public history mix in the lives of famous people. The modern monarchy's legitimacy is based on more than simply rituals and ceremonies. It is also based on stories that need both transparency and prudence. Like everyone else, Queen Camilla has layers of private feelings and public actions in her life. The interplay of these factors, personal memory stored in a private dwelling institution's claims of historical continuity, and the present public's need for recorded truth will likely continue to affect the discourse. If any items of broader relevance emerge, their examination will need intellectual patience and archival diligence. Even if they don't come to light, the program will still show how technology can change the stories we tell and how important it is to know where things came from and who owns them in order to comprehend history. This occurrence shows that the past is seldom fully contained. It persists in objects, locations, and the lives of those associated with it, and each new method of investigation has the potential to reveal previously obscured aspects of that persistence. This is true no matter what. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.